alleging that the government has failed to address the real issues of inflation and other concerns of the people of India to Trinamool Congress chief and West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, calling it a visionless and Humpty Dumpty budget, to Samajwadi Party saying that farmers have been shortchanged. The reaction from the opposition on expected lines, the DMK too has targeted the centre and has accused it of empty promises. Is this budget then a budget of long-term vision or short-term blind spots? I'm going to take those questions to the big face-off of the two newsmakers who will be joining me shortly. But first up, here's what happened today.
That citizens benefit. We are inspired by three kartavya. Our first kartavya is to accelerate and sustain economic growth. Our second kartavya is to fulfill aspirations of our people. Our third kartavya, aligned with our vision of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in Budget 2026-27 pitched a roadmap for growth, investment and fiscal stability. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called it a confidence booster at a time of global uncertainty.
भारत के 140 करोड़ नागरिक फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग इकोनॉमी बनकर ही संतुष्ट नहीं है। हम जल्द से जल्द दुनिया की तीसरी सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था बनना चाहते हैं।
But the opposition has torn into the budget, calling it hollow, directionless and blind to the crisis on the ground. The grand old party led by Rahul Gandhi alleged that the budget failed to address India's real crises, including rising inflation and falling rupee.
इसमें कुछ नहीं है। इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल करने के लिए भी इनका कोई समाधान, सकारात्मक कोई सलाह या कोई कदम उन्होंने नहीं दिखाया।
हम जो इंतजार कर रहे थे मेरे केरला में हम कुछ नहीं सुन पाए। एक टर्टल ट्रेल के बारे में सुना, उसके अलावा और रेयर अर्थ्स मैं भी कुछ समय से कह रहा था, लेकिन उसके अलावा केरला के लिए कुछ नहीं सुनाई दिया।
Mamata Banerjee has dubbed the budget visionless, alleging it is anti-women and anti-tribal.
What they said about 3 corridor, that is absolutely a garbage of lies, blatant lies. It is already on process. They have not given a single paisa to Bengal. Only one tax is there, GST. They are taking away our money. They want to destroy the economic structure of the country.
The Samajwadi Party claimed that farmers were shortchanged and that the budget fails to give impetus to growth.
ये गरीब का पेट कहीं नहीं भर सकते है ये बजट। नौकरी रोजगार दिए नहीं, नौकरी रोजगार कहाँ दिए? अभी भी बड़े पैमाने पे नौजवान बेरोजगार है। सपने दिखाने वाला बजट है।
Really nothing in the budget and जो technical terms यूज किए गए हैं और जिस तरह की बातें बोली गई हैं, एक आम इंसान पहली बात तो ये बातों को समझेगा। इंसान भाई एक्सपेक्ट करते थे स्पेशली कि हमारे को सब्सिडीज मिले, इसमें हमें दाम कम हो, तो ऐसा कुछ भी किसान भाइयों के लिए नहीं है, हमारी महिलाओं के लिए नहीं है।
The DMK has also targeted the centre.
There's nothing actually concrete in this budget. And even with the elections in mind, they have not announced anything for Tamil Nadu. They're not giving us anything, but then they want to, mine rare earth.
And joining me on this special broadcast is our two leaders who have continued with this tradition of a healthy debate and discussion. We have Member of Parliament of the Congress Party from Thiruvananthapuram, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and National Vice President of the BJP, Mr. Panda. Thank you so much for speaking to India today. Dr. Tharoor, Is there some aspect of the budget that you think is positive? We have got your reaction of how you have dismissed the budget. Is there something that they have got it right?
Well, look, I have written articles advocating the mining of rare earths, so I can't say that that's a bad idea. It's a good idea. At the same time, it'll take 15 years to be realized. You don't do this overnight. It takes time to mine them, to create the infrastructure, and to do the processing. And so we're about 15 years away from reducing our dependence on importing rare earths. But at least, you know, well begun is half done kind of thing, but it's still only a case of better late than never. There's nothing much else to applaud. Otherwise, I'm afraid as an MP from Kerala, I'm deeply disappointed by the way in which the government has sort of completely reduced Kerala to an invisible Kerala. It should be the new hashtag for the state. Instead of incredible India, whatever, we have invisible Kerala. We contribute to the nation's skilled workforce, remittances, tourism, but we're invisible to the government. Everything we were expecting and looking for, nothing has come. So it's been truly disappointing. There may be things for which they haven't yet spelled out the details, even in the budget document. They've talked about creating an All India Institute for Ayurveda. We assume that Kerala, as the place that has done more than any other place in India to keep Ayurveda alive, will be a beneficiary of one of those All India Institutes. We're still waiting, though, 12 years since the first ever NDA budget for the AIIMS that was promised in that budget. It still hasn't come to Kerala. We're waiting for progress in railway connectivity. There were mentions of 7 new high-speed rail corridors, but this dense state of Kerala has not been given, despite repeated requests from the state government for a rapid transit rail corridor. We have a major port in Vizhinjam, and again, in referring to ports, there was no reference to Kerala. Inland waterways were talked about with ship repair for inland waterways in Patna and Varanasi. Kerala has more inland waterways than the rest of the country put together practically, but we have no such facility announced for us. Our coastal development, our port-led development has been neglected. There's nothing to protect the coastline. We're losing territory every year from our coast to coastal erosion. The state government says they don't have any money. The central government says it's not their problem. So one thing after another, I'm afraid all I'm seeing is a disappointment after disappointment from Kerala's point of view.
Okay, that's a long list of disappointment that has been put out by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Panda. Why has the finance minister, should I say the Union Budget 2026, invisibilized Kerala? It's a beautiful country, God's own country, and also a pole-bound state. You are looking at expanding your footprints there.
First of all, my friend Shashi Tharoor, at least occasionally, finds some things palatable and good for the country in the various budgets over the years. But unfortunately, the opposition largely just tries to see things negatively, and they have continually been proven wrong again and again, year after year after year. Like this year, we have heard many opposition leaders talk about nothing in the budget, nothing for the common man, etc. And it is precisely during these last 11, 12 years that India has surged dramatically economically. We have been the fastest growing large economy for many years now, I think 7 or 8 years continually. We have become the best managed economy among the large economies. For example, if you look at our fiscal deficit, I compliment Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to stick to her commitment of bringing down fiscal deficit below 4.5%, targeting 4.3% next year. This is critical because this gives you the fiscal headroom to invest in people and to invest in infrastructure, which is exactly what the Modi government has been doing for more than a decade. Also, another example of how the budget is one of the best managed in the world is our debt to GDP ratio at 55%. Is very, very well managed. I mean, if you look at countries like the US, you look at European nations like the UK, even otherwise earlier well-managed nations like Japan and Singapore, they have 2 to 3 times of the debt to GDP ratio that India has. They have, some of them have 50% or more higher fiscal deficit than we have. So what has all this meant? It has meant a huge improvement in infrastructure. The number of airports have been doubled in the last 10 years compared to what was built in the previous 75 years. Look at jobs. If you see the last jobs report that came out in October of last year, it pointed out that between 2017 and 2023, there was a 17 crore increase in the number of jobs. And that is huge by any measure. Now, if you look at the programs that the government has run, that for 800 million people, it runs a food grain program. So my point is, this year, in this budget, the targeted funding of schemes that will create jobs. Now, Shashi did mention that Kerala has a tradition not just of Ayurveda, but of health practitioners, of nurses, of other such practitioners, caregivers. And this is a major thrust area of this budget. Kerala, along with many other states, will benefit immensely. The high-speed rail corridors, which cross 8 states, each of them is like creating new mega airports along the line, because that's the kind of multiplier effect it will have. I want to conclude by saying this. The opposition had got used for many decades that the budget would be focusing on the minutiae and forgetting the achievement of larger objectives. This has been flipped upside down, and the major objectives have been managed extremely well. The proof of the pudding is the 250 million people that have been pulled out of poverty, which is the highest in this century by any nation.
Okay, but Jai Panda, the concerns of Dr. Tharoor hasn't been addressed here. But I must compliment both of you that I have been doing this interview of a face-off between two of you for years now, and you have been very magnanimous in agreeing all the time. But Dr. Shashi Tharoor, the Treasury benches see a long list of things that they are doing, particularly keeping in mind the geopolitical uncertainties, the turbulence times that we are living in. That is the reason why multiple FTAs have been worked out, understanding fully well that there is an unpredictable White House. Will you not compliment Finance Minister and the government for something, for getting the FTAs right at least?
Well, let me come to that in a minute. The FTAs are the Commerce Minister, not the Finance Minister. But sure, I have a lot of good things to say about that. But before that, let me respond to my friend Jay, because honestly, for him to talk about how happy he is with the fiscal deficit going down from 4.5 to 4.4 to 4.3 next year, well, I've been around in Parliament long enough, and so is he in the old days, even if he was in the wrong house at the time, to remember the former Finance Minister Arun Jaitley announcing very grandly that his objective was to bring the fiscal deficit down to 3.5%. So we are a very long way from there. The numbers have been scaled up considerably since the late Finance Minister announced that target, and now we're supposed to be applauding 4.3. There's some discipline there, I agree, but at the same time, it's a long way from where the NDA intended to be 10 years ago. Secondly, when he talks about jobs, this macro picture of large numbers of people getting jobs, I'm not sure where that comes from, because I've got a very concrete example to give you. When 8,868 railway jobs were advertised, there were 12 million applicants for those jobs. That's 1,370 applicants per job. You think that's reflecting a high employment situation in our country? In Jaipur, 53,000 peon positions were advertised. 2.5 million people applied for them. There were 187 Home Guard posts advertised in Sambalpur, 8,000 applicants. And these are people with college degrees and PhDs for jobs that require an 8th grade pass or a high school graduation. We are looking at a country where, unfortunately, the educated unemployed are literally all over the place. So yes, Jay, I can applaud rare earths as a long-term prospect in the distant future, but the rare earths are under the ground, and a lot of what you're saying is building castles in the air. And that's something that truly worries me. Now, to come to your question on FTAs. Yes, I do believe the FTAs are necessary and are a good idea. And I applaud the negotiators of the government of India, especially, I suppose, the Commerce Minister rather than the Finance Minister. Nothing against the Finance Minister, it's just not her particular bailiwick. But having said that, we really will now have to see this translating into two things: significantly enhanced exports of items manufactured in India, and thereby generating more jobs for Indians in India. When that happens, we will have a lot more to applaud. Right now, there's a signature. We've lost a significant portion of the large American market, and we hope to replace it with a large European market. But the agreement is not yet enforced. This is not going to happen overnight. There are procedures in the European Union which have yet to be undergone before the agreement can come into force. So let's hold our breath, but I'm not at all unwilling to applaud something that does good for my country and my people. That's a cardinal principle, I think, of democratic politics. And I'm willing to applaud
Okay.
it, but let's get there and let's see the tangible benefits. Right now, the benefits
Okay.
just talking about are not visible on the ground in the life of
Jai
the
Panda,
Amar.
respond to that.
So, yes, so while I thank Shashi for applauding some parts of the budget, I think, being such a wordsmith that he is, he dances around some of the facts and figures which I think need a bit more light. So my late friend Arun Jaitley's targets for the fiscal deficit was pre-COVID. As Shashi knows very well, the COVID pandemic upset the economies of the entire world and everybody went into double digits. India too went into double digits. From that to come back to 4.4% now, keep in mind the US at 6.3 or 6.4% is 50% higher fiscal deficit than India. With the debt to GDP ratio of 55%, other nations like UK, US, Singapore and Japan are 300 to 400% higher than India. So yes, indeed, Nirmala ji has managed the economy extremely well under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. I also wanted to just add a few things, which is that it's understandable when people want to apply for government jobs because the mindset that the previous decades under the Congress had built up in India was that the government jobs were the only jobs available. And the good thing is, under the Modi government, in just the last year, the data received, the government jobs have gone up by 111%. But to counter that mindset that it's only the government that provides jobs, the Modi government has had a major thrust on the startup ecosystem. India has become the third largest startup ecosystem. Large numbers of women are being entrepreneurs. Now this new thing about Lakhpati Didis going into crores of women is being translated and gear shifted in this budget to make them micro and small entrepreneurs. The big thrust on MSME, small industries, is going to be transformational for India.
You know, you speak about MSMEs. For the longest time, I remember there is one thing or the other that is announced. When we were speaking to some investors and experts earlier today, and this is a question to Jai Panda, they were of the opinion that lots has to be done. And they were expecting some kind of reforms, that reform engine or reform path should continue. Are there those elements of reforms that you're seeing here?
Very, very major reforms are happening. So I've already mentioned about the crores of women who are now self-sufficient, and they are not just independent economically themselves, but also taking care of their families under the Lakhpati Didi scheme. Now that is being moved forward. But let me point out, I think one of the, as far as I'm concerned personally, I'm proudest of one of the major reforms that has been implemented this time, which is income tax reforms. Now, I had the privilege of chairing the select committee on the income tax overhaul, which was an all-party committee, and we gave a unanimous report. Massive simplification of the income tax code, which the finance minister has indicated will go on stream exactly as scheduled in April. And the new Saral form itself is going to make life dramatically easier for 100 million Indians who are taxpayers. Also keep in mind the decriminalization of a large number of minor offenses, also ease for NGOs and charities and corporates alike. The income tax and the customs reforms that have been brought in this time are massive, and you will hear industry and you will hear experts talk about it with great promise in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, Dr.
Let me
Tharoor.
chip in on that. Yes, I mean, first of all, there's just so much to be said about the issues you've raised with Jay that he has answered in his charming way without fully addressing your questions. MSMEs, for example, much talk about that. In fact, the finance minister even spoke about championing MSMEs. The problem is that the very economic survey that was tabled the day before her budget says that credit risk is a huge challenge at the moment. There's a 30 lakh crore credit gap for MSMEs, whereas she's talking about giving 10,000 crores. 30 lakh crore credit gap, concentrated lending, limited progress on cash flow-based credit, These are all from the economic survey that I'm quoting. And so where are you going to get these champions from if the MSMEs are struggling with such a major credit shortage? Then Jay talks about jobs and says that, oh, it's all about, it's only about the government jobs and so on. Well, as far as the startup schemes are concerned, he talked about the Lakhpati Didis, fine. I have another Didi in mind, actually, a young woman whose video was going around. I'm sure that Jay also has WhatsApp inflicted on him, when the government shut down instead of starting up a whole number of companies in the gaming sector. Now, I'm not suggesting that there wasn't anything wrong that required action, but this girl was pleading for the thousands, tens of thousands of people who were going to lose their jobs. And frankly, what the government should instead have done was to engage in a constructive discussion with stakeholders, rather than shutting down startups. And in fact, I think only a token amount of 900 crores has been sanctioned under the Startup India Fund under the current budget. So it's not as if startups have been given any significant priority. And then look at the areas of omission. Air pollution was not even mentioned. And we're living in this unbreathable city of Delhi, where people go to Davos and hear Smriti Irani decrying air pollution and Geeta Gopinath warning about how it's going to do great damage to our economic growth. Even the national ambient air quality standards on which the National Clean Air Program relies were last revised in 2009. The government has been completely lackadaisical on clean air, and I say this as somebody who out of his own pocket has been running a clean air roundtable every year for the last 10 years in Delhi, trying to get the attention and engagement of the government as well. There are issue after issue with, again, I'm only addressing some of the issues that you yourself have raised, Maria. When we look at jobs, for example, Jay talks about high ambitious announcements by the government. The problem is, let's look at their actual implementation. In fiscal year 25-26, there was a Prime Minister's internship scheme announced, where 11,500 plus crores were allocated in the last budget. You know how much the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has spent on the Prime Minister's internship scheme? Exactly 500 crores. Now, this is the kind of implementation we're seeing. There's no point having grand budget announcements if they're not matched with reality on the ground.
Yes.
If
you know, in fact, yes, please go ahead, Dr. Tharoor.
No, I'm just saying time after time, we talk about skill development. What about the placement record, which has been really weak? If you look one thing after another in our situation, we get these schemes, and I'm not objecting. I mean, I like the idea, for example, of giving for agriculture this AI. Even Jay hasn't mentioned it, but it's something that the government is touting, that they're going to bring in some Bharat Vistar, a multilingual AI tool, to help agriculture. But you're talking about an agricultural India where mechanization is still limited, where only 9.1% of agricultural households even own a tractor, 2.3% have a power tiller, 0.5% have a harvester. What's the point of talking about AI when basic mechanization is not yet available to our farmers? So there is, I must say, a kind of gap between the reality on the ground and the announcements in the air. The healthcare that Jay was touting in his earlier response, the budget has now promised to create a new cadre of caregivers, but it's not doing anything about the 10 lakh existing ASHA workers in the country. I know them because I met many of the 30,000 who work in Kerala. They're the ones holding up India's public health system, but they're treated as volunteers. They're paid a meager honorarium of between 2,000 and 4,000 rupees a month, sometimes working 18-hour days for that kind of salary, supplemented by some irregular task-based incentives, and denied minimum wages, denied pension, denied job security. So what's the point of announcing a new cadre of caregivers when you can't take care of your existing cadre of caregivers? These are the kinds of realities I want to remind my friend Jay.
Okay, talking about realities, and N.K. Singh, the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, Jay Panda, was highlighting that he had allocated 8,000 crore for new urban cities, and that stands unutilized. Do you think that non-utilization of allocated funds is also a big challenge?
First of all, I would like to thank Shashi for helping me out in mentioning the AI initiative in agriculture, which I had not covered. I just want to address a couple of things. Shashi talked about the gap in credit availability to MSMEs. Now, this is not a new thing. The credit available to MSMEs has been a perennial problem for decades, right from independence. But the data shows very clearly that in the last decade, India has seen the most massive increase in credit available to MSMEs and to individual entrepreneurs, not just to Lakhpati Didis, but the Mudra scheme, the most massive increase in credit access to the underprivileged in India in the history of independent India. So that is a transformation that is happening. Now, other initiatives, for example, the thrust on manufacturing as well as services, both. The thrust on biopharmaceuticals, for instance. I think Shashi's home state and others like mine, Odisha, would be able to take advantage of many of these schemes and the funding made available to create jobs and to create investment. Now, I also wanted to point out, Shashi talked about a young lady whose gaming thing had been shut down. You know, over the last couple of years, several sites had to be shut down because they were unauthorizedly functioning with funding from China and other nations in the gaming sector as well as the fintech sector without regulatory approvals. But that aside, the genuine ones have grown immensely. And the finance minister in this budget today mentioned specifically about the potential of 2 million jobs exactly in this, in animation, gaming, and visual effects, and for this funding has been made available. So these are very major steps that are being taken. And let me just conclude by saying this. India, over the past decade, and particularly now, is the toast of the world in terms of economic management. It is being hailed as the biggest success story of the last decade. And of course, the opposition in India will have to find things to criticize. That's their job. But again, like every year in the past 12 years, they will again get proven wrong as this budget gets implemented.
Look, Maria,
Dr.
I'm
Tharoor,
not
let me give you
surprised.
the last word. And I'm going to wrap this up with the final comments from both of you. Please go ahead, Dr. Tharoor.
No, I just want to say I'm not surprised that Jay is getting animated about animation, but it's exactly like the same problem that I pointed out with his earlier claims. If you look at the situation in our education space, we have over 1 lakh of single teacher schools serving 33 lakh students. We have enrollment declining. We have only 57% of our schools having computers. Only 54% of our schools have internet access. 17% of schools are offering secondary education. The challenge is trying to get meaningful learning outcomes at a more basic level. Now, setting up an animated content lab in 15,000 secondary schools sounds fine, but when half the schools don't even have computer connections and internet connections, what are you going to do with this animation? I mean, you know, I really don't want to pour rain on the parade all the time, but the fact is, for God's sake, connect to the real India, to the real world. And this is why when people in the opposition are criticizing the government too should listen. I agree that there are lots of good things that the government always wants to shelter behind, but they must try and relate those good things to the real experience of ordinary human beings. See how much money is in the pocket of the Aam Aadmi. There's a seriously dangerous rise, for example, in credit card debt and personal loans because people are not able to make ends meet in our middle classes. They are actually suffering on a daily basis, and therefore talking about filling in tax forms more easily doesn't solve the problem, because unless you have the money to pay the taxes, the filling in the tax forms more easily is all very well, but they are going through a much more difficult time. I also want to address to Jay something we've talked about in previous years. Jay used to talk very proudly about the foreign direct investment inflows. What's happening? November was the fourth successive month in which foreign direct investment declined. We are seeing money being repatriated. We're seeing the rupee declining. We're seeing considerable disinvestment. We had net FDI inflows of 27 billion last year. Brazil had 74. Singapore had 143. So we are simply not in the picture when it comes to FDI, which was something the government used to tout as a big indication of a vote of confidence in the Indian economy. How does Jay respond to that?
Okay, Jay Panda, that will be your last comment. Please go ahead.
So my concluding remarks, my concluding remarks are all the statistics that Shashi pointed out to show that we still have a lot of catching up to do. The reality is we are just about middle income country, we yes indeed have a lot of development left, and that is why Prime Minister Modi has the vision for Viksit Bharat for 2047. But all these statistics are dramatically better today than they were 12 or 15 years ago, and certainly much better than they were 30 or 40 years ago. There have been dramatic improvements, which is why I keep saying that India's economy is the toast of the world. He talked about FDI. That's because India has absorbed a lot already, and this is the reason our forex reserves have gone beyond $700 billion just now. Now, Shashi, the foreign policy maven, would admit that the world is a very different place today than it was just 14 months ago. And despite that, India continues to be the fastest growing big economy, headed towards the third largest. I've given you the jobs data, I've given you the investment data and the infrastructure data. I just want to mention one last thing, and which is of all the other aspects that indicates India is a well-managed economy, inflation. India has the best inflation management of any large economy, apart from all the other statistics that I've given you. So we are on trajectory, we are on track to a Viksit Bharat in 2047. This budget shifts gears, and a year later, you will be seeing the results of this budget's implementation.
Okay, perhaps we'll have this conversation again in 2027. So, Dr. Tharoor and Jai Panda, really appreciate your time. Thank you for agreeing to do this face-off, or should I say debate among the two of you, as you have been doing for so many years. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Maria. All the best, Jai.
Thank you. It's a good tradition.
Thank you. And you heard from Dr. Shashi Tharoor. His entire criticism has been about what the state of Kerala has not got so far, something similar to what Chief Minister of Kerala, Pinarayi Vijayan, has been stating, that the state has been overlooked. Something also what Mamata Banerjee, the Chief Minister of Bengal, has to say, exactly similar to M.K. Stalin's Tamil Nadu. Let me take all these questions and all the criticism which is coming in to Union Minister Hardeep Singh Puri, who joins me now. Hardeep Singh Puri, really appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to India today. In Budget 2026, Mr. Puri, what are the key sectors that the government has prioritized to ensure high quality economic growth while managing fiscal discipline?
I think if you look at the overall thrust of the budget, it continues the ongoing process of high growth with low inflation and capital expenditure increase, which by itself is enormous. By the way, in 2014, Maria ji, we had set aside 2 lakh crores for capital expenditure. Last year, when it went up to 11 lakh crores, there were people like me, you know, I tend to be a bit cynical. I said, how will we sustain it? This year, it's gone up to 12 lakh crores. Then, if you look at all the other areas, today, for instance, just to give you an example, somebody who's involved with an energy-related portfolio like me, a 20,000 crore outlay for CCUS. Now, isn't that part of decarbonization? Isn't that part of the energy growth? Isn't that part of something extremely important globally when you are making a transition? In biofuels, you've gone from 1.4% to 20%. And look, I was very happy, Maria ji, to find that biogas, which is mixed in CBG, will not be included in the assessed value. It's a small step, but very significant. Similarly, when you have other connectivity, high-speed corridors, rail corridors, when you do take measures, and I have a list of these, you know, I was so impressed with that, you know, 10,000 crores for biopharma Shakti mission, 10,000 crore for container manufacturing, 3 dedicated chemical parks, 10,000 crore for MSME growth fund. If you look at the totality of this, you are opening new avenues. Now, if this takes off, you see, there's no point putting 100,000 crores when you don't know how it take off. But some of the things were talked about last year. This year, there is an outlay. And I'm sure as we go along, for instance, the biopharma, to me, that's very important. If you look at the pharmaceutical sector, we have a very well-developed and buoyant sector there in this global changes which are taking place. You know, even other outlays. People said health, education. Health increases 6%, education increases 8%. We are living as an oasis of calm in the midst of global turmoil. The defense modernization figures I calculated increase of 22%. Now, considering what happened on our western neighbor front, I mean, these are things you'll have to do, because you have to raise the defense budget overall. If you only raise it by 10%, you know, it doesn't work. Overall, the outlay has gone up by 15%, but the defense modernization has gone up. So, Maria, I think overall, this is a very mature budget intended for an economy growing at 7.4% and moving from 4th position to 3rd position and finally on to 2047. Viksit Bharat.
Mr. Puri, you know, 20,000 crore has been allocated to CCUS, carbon capture and storage. How will the refineries take advantage of that allocation?
Well, first of all, let me in the interest of full disclosure, this is not just meant for the refineries. The refineries are one of the eligible sectors which can take advantage of the CCUS. Now, in the refineries, you have clear possibility of immediate benefit from this, because, you know, decarbonization is a very important part of our story. So, the refineries are transiting, you know, first of all, they were mainly only processing crude oil to make petroleum and diesel. Now they are getting to make petrochemicals, but decarbonization will always continue to be a very one. And this is a very important part of the reform express. And steel, you know, power, cement, all these sectors need to decarbonize. So this 20,000 crores is a very significant, you could say it's not that large. I know it's not large, but it's a beginning. I mean, how do you know that we, some of my colleagues and I used to fret sometimes that we are talking about carbon capture and storage, but we need to do something about it. So we are taking a number of steps on both carbon capture and storage, but this incentive will go a long way for all these sectors, the refineries, steel, power, etc., to take advantage of that. This is one of the many positive steps.
One thought, of course, I would say Donald Trump, the US president, today said that India will be buying oil from Venezuela and not Iran. So has Donald Trump decided and India has agreed for buying oil from Venezuela and not from Iran?
Let me, since this is on the budget, but you are choosing to speak about what President Trump said, let me explain to you that we had a bilateral discussion, a call between the President of Venezuela, Her Excellency Delcy Rodriguez, on 30th January. We also had a delegation from Venezuela at the India Energy Week, which took place in Goa between the 27th and the 30th of January. I have myself been dealing with these issues. Our PSUs have a long-standing relationship with Venezuela's national oil company, which is called PDVSA, and we have been maintaining an office there. Our refineries are configured to use Venezuelan oil. By the way, I had $1 billion stuck there. I mean our energy system. So there is nothing new. I mean, if instead of focusing on some statement made elsewhere, if you look at the full facts, we have been diversifying our energy sources. We will buy from wherever we get the oil at the most competitive rates. Our refineries can use that oil, that heavy crude which comes from there, and it is part of our energy security. We used to buy from 27 countries. We are now buying from 41. And if the energy sector and if the production in Venezuela, which has massive reserves, but the current production is only 1 million barrels a day, if it picks up, and we can get more oil and we can get our money back, that's good news for us.
Okay. My last question to you, and this is with regards to the criticism which is coming in from the opposition, Mr. Puri, that this is a budget without employment vision. Beyond macro numbers, how does the BJP really address that concern with regards to jobs, that the jobs are not really being created on the ground?
First of all, I've been advised by my colleagues to be very respectful to the opposition, and I'm always respectful because this is a democracy. I mean, if we didn't have an opposition, we wouldn't have such a good story to tell. Look, employment generation takes place in a number of ways. When you move from a $2 trillion to a $4 trillion, when your per capita income goes up, you are generating employment and you're improving the nature of employment. Now, employment takes place if you do shipbuilding. Let me give you an idea. Just now, the Prime Minister announced major reforms in the maritime sector. Just now at India Energy Week, one of our OMC signed a deal with Korean and Japanese companies. And we are building greenfield shipyards, massive increase in employment. When we set up a refinery somewhere, you are employing hundreds and thousands of people. So the employment is being generated on a continuous basis. We are at 260 million metric tons per annum of this thing, and we are moving now to 320 million metric tons per annum. But Maria, the most important thing, anyone who wants to criticize the budget should note, in 2014, our total outlay on capital expenditure, madam, was 2 lakh crores. Last year, when it went up to 11 lakh crores, there were guys like me who tend to be cynical sometimes. I said, how will we be able to absorb this large amount of 11 lakh crore? Today, it's gone up to 12 lakhs crore, 12.2 lakh crore. And if capital expenditure doesn't generate employment, I don't know what will.
All right. Hardeep Puri, really appreciate your time. Always a pleasure listening to you and your views on multiple subjects. So thank you so much. Let me bring in Amitabh Kant, former CEO of NITI Aayog. He joins me live. Mr. Kant, the budget 2026 leans heavily on crowding in private capital. What's that one reform in this budget that actually changes boardroom sentiments, not just headlines?
Well, I think it's the budget has been very fiscally prudent in a very complex geopolitical times. I think the most important thing about the budget is that it is very, it focuses on fiscal consolidation, and that's why it drives in private sector investment. It doesn't crowd out private sector investment because it brings down the fiscal deficit from 4.4 to 4.3%. It brings down the debt to GDP ratio to 55.6%. And more than anything else, it focuses on capex spend, which is 12.2 lakh crore, which is in effect 4.4%. In reality, is 4.4% of your GDP. Historically, this has never been done before. But the budget lays a lot of emphasis on manufacturing and infrastructure in a very big way, which I'll come to. But if you ask me what is the smartest thing in the budget, it's the tax exemption for data centers till 2047. It's unparalleled to my mind because 75% of the investments being driven across the world is in AI and data centers. If India is able to attract data centers, AI, computing power, cloud infrastructure, then you are technologically leapfrogging into another era. And this is, to my mind, really path-breaking.
Of course, Mr. Kant, that AI data centers is something that is being spoken about a lot by the industry as well. But there's also this sense that the real competition in the artificial intelligence space is happening between the US and China. India is still, trying to play catch up.
I don't think you should worry about that. It's in many of these technology areas, it's not the first mover which wins. You have all the data in the world today. No other country has the kind of data which India has. No other country has the talent which India has. It just needs to build more and more of both application layers and large language models, which the government has pushed for. The AI mission will drive this in a very big way. And I think we should look at the next 15 years, 10 years, 15 years. Don't worry it overnight what will happen. Like we came out a winner in digital public infrastructure, we'll come out a winner in artificial intelligence as well.
Okay, this is with regards to employment generation, because the budget is always also about giving a direction to sectors from where employment will emerge in terms of reforms. The budget bets on capex-led growth. But India's biggest pressure point has been jobs, Mr. Kant. Does the current strategy then generate enough employment fast enough?
Well, this budget is about infrastructure. It's also about manufacturing in a very big way because it spells out the strategic areas on which it will focus on: bio, pharma, many other areas. It focus semiconductor, many other areas. But it's heavily weighed in favor of urbanization as well, because if you look at it, they've talked about 5,000 crore per city for economic regions for Tier 2 and Tier 3 city. They've talked about 7 high-speed rail corridors between cities as growth connectors. But on the job side, there's massive emphasis on sectors which have been hit by Trumpian tariffs. If you look at marine sector, if you look at textile, if you look at leather and footwear, all these sectors are job creating, where the government has put in a lot of resources in this budget. So I think the budget lays a lot of emphasis on all these areas, including job creating sectors as well. So long term, it puts in a lot of resources into tourism as well, through the 15 regional archaeological sites which will be developed. So a huge emphasis on job creating sectors.
Okay, my last question to you, Mr. Kant, which is with regards to China plus, that is what is gaining traction. Is budget 2026 finally India's now or never moment? Particularly with regards to manufacturing, or do you see that there are visible bottlenecks in implementation or execution?
Maria, we should continue to be focused on our ambition to be a Viksit Bharat, and that's a long sprint of 22 years. Our aim should be to grow at 8 to 9% per annum, year after year, and continue to do constant reforms, day after day, push for free enterprise, push for private sector growth, push for reviving private capex expenditure into India. Let us not get obsessed by China plus one. My view is that this requires a lot of passion, commitment, and vision over a long period. China didn't do overnight. It took them 25 years to be able to do this. If you've started this long spurt of growth now, you need to do this over the next 15 years. Make India easy and simple, but make India cost competitive as well. A lot of work will have to be done by our state governments. A lot of work will have to be done by our cities, and a lot of work will have to be done by smart urbanization.
All right. Amitabh, Kant, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your views on Budget 2026. Of course, the big question is that the government has shown the direction. Now, will the industry come in, and if they will pull in into this larger idea of India's growth story?